Okay, so hey guys, and welcome back to another predictions video, and in today's video I'm going to be predicting the Lara versus Garcia fight. If you're new around here though and you haven't subscribed, please do so, like the video if you need like video, and let's get straight into it. So, going into this fight, Lara is 29-3-3 with 17 KOs, and Garcia is 37-3 with 21 KOs. This fight is for the WBA World Middleweight title. Lara's last fight was a win via TKO in round 8 versus O'Sullivan, over a year out now. And Garcia's last fight was a win via majority decision versus Benavidez Jr., also over a year out. Garcia is 35 and Lara is 40. Lara has a 74-inch reach and Garcia has a 68.5-inch reach. Lara's losses have come against Hurd in 2018, Canelo in 2014, and Williams in 2011. Garcia's losses have come against Spence Jr. in 2020, Porter in 2018, and Thurman in 2017. Garcia is the former WBC World Welterweight Champion, and just before we kind of start to analyse them as fighters, I just did want to kind of touch upon what I've just mentioned there. And so Lara, his last fight, and Garcia's last fight, of course, they've both been quite a long time out, and Spence probably not been as active as everybody would have wanted, and as probably what they would have wanted, to be completely honest. I'm not entirely sure, but at least not what everybody else wants. And I mean, for Lara, it was a good victory versus O'Sullivan, a solid victory, a nice TKO against maybe not an amazingly good opponent, but I would say performance that is probably one of his best performances as of recent times, and one that was definitely necessary, and one which is definitely only going to boost confidence. And Garcia's last fight was probably a bit more of a tick-over fight, didn't really show anything crazily impressive, but was a solid performance against a tough opponent, and was one which was also just nice for them to be able to kind of get back to winning ways, especially for Garcia coming off that Spence Jr. loss prior to that fight. Garcia, like I've mentioned, the age gap 35-40 for Lara. Lara is his first fight of being a 40-year-old man, and of course age is going to play somewhat of a factor. I don't know how big of a factor it's going to look. Like I mentioned, Lara coming off a great victory for himself, but of course age is there for both fighters, and it'll be interesting to see if and where both of these fighters go after this fight. Like I said, there's a little bit of a reach difference. Lara, of course, is going to have to utilise that. Garcia is probably going to have to be that more inside type fighter. Lara's losses, like I mentioned, he's not had one for a little while, but they've been all quite close decisions. Same with Garcia, but Lara's more especially. Against Canelo was a good performance, very good performance. I believe he got knocked down, and that was the kind of reason why he lost, but even then people were still saying he won. And against Hurd and Williams, they were both very close fights as well, and so all of his losses have been close, and people have said that he's been robbed before against these opponents that he's lost to, and in ones he's drew against as well, but he's just not always got that kind of look that he's maybe deserved. And Garcia's losses, I mean, the Spence Jr. won, Porter won. He did get kind of pieced up against Porter. Same against Spence, to be completely honest, and Thurman, but they're all against top guys, so you kind of got to expect it. And since coming up into this weight of middleweight, he's looked solid, he's looked good, and not been around this weight for a crazy amount of time, but he's been good so far, and managed to get himself a ranking, and is going to be a good opponent for anybody. World title level, currently not too sure. I think there was probably better opponents for Lara, bigger fights for Lara, ones which probably would have benefited the division a little bit more, but we've got this, and it was an interesting one in the way it's been made. I mean, it's not really been advertised too much, it's not even really been officially announced, I don't think, but it's happening from what I believe and from what I've read, and so that's why I'm here going along with this prediction. But let's kind of speak about both fighters. So Lara, he's a good counter puncher, he's accurate, got good footwork, kind of crafty type fighter, got fast hands, course experienced, been on a good run as of recent. He's precise, not had a real kind of terrible looking fight yet, and people are saying maybe there's one of them to come with his age, but he's seemingly only really kind of improving with age, to be completely fair. His power's coming through nicely now, and people always say that's the last thing to go, but seems like it's kind of just improving more and more yet. And he's got good shot selection, He sets traps well, he imposes and improves throughout. He kind of freezes his opponent with his impressive movement at times, and he can be that difficult of an opponent just from his speed and from his movement, and it is going to be such a big kind of loss when they do eventually kind of fade a bit, as I feel like maybe it'd be interesting to see when them do fade a little bit what he still has that left. Not saying that's his only thing that he's got, but that's such a good thing that he's got such a good attribute, that speed and that footwork, that when that does go at some point, I feel like it will have to at some point, then what does he still have left? Of course, the accuracy is very impressive as well, and like I mentioned, the power just coming through. So I feel like he is still a top level fighter, and I feel like for himself, this is a good fight. It's a good test. I feel like possibly if he'd fought another maybe higher level fighter in this division, then this fight could go and play out a different way. But for himself, I think this is a good fight. It's a very tough fight still, but it's a good fight against a good ranked opponent to just kind of keep having big fights and keep the fans kind of entertained and at least a little bit happy with him. And I would say possibly his negatives, like I mentioned, he can be quite unlucky. That's not really a style negative. It's just his luck is just unlucky. He can let fights get a little bit too close at times. Like I mentioned, he's not always had the best of luck, but you can't just blame that on judges all the time. It can also be down to, if it keeps continuously happening, that he's just not showing himself quite as much, or he's not making fights as convincing as maybe he could. He's, like I've mentioned, not had the most active of times as of recent. The past few years hasn't been the most active for him. There's questions if he's past his prime. I would say that like I said, there's only going to be things going at this point in his career, I believe, and I think it's nice to see his power coming through now, but I feel like it's maybe a little bit too late for it to be coming through. I feel like you want it to be coming through a little bit earlier on, but still a world-class fighter and a world-level fighter. And so Garcia as a fighter, also a good counterer. I feel like possibly styles clash a little bit in this fight. He's a good body puncher. He has to set up with the jab, but when he does, he has a good jab there. He's got a very good left hook, his kind of famous left hook. He's got a very good chin. He's smart. He knows how to let off shots when he does let them off, and he can be in positions where maybe he's kind of under a bit of pressure, and he always seems to be able to find and let off a shot from somewhere and gets kind of good, I suppose, maybe angles from that as well, and that can be quite impressive. And I think he is a good high level counterer, and the fact that he is going to be kind of throwing that all kind of shot selection is going to be tough. I think if he can set up shots with a jab, then possibly he would find more success, but with Lara with the reach, it could be more difficult. I think there's definitely questions of Garcia also being past his prime. He's struggled a little bit more moving up in weight, in my opinion. I feel like maybe that is just his age and that kind of past of prime that's just showing as of recent, and that's come with him also moving up in weight in the process. He's got kind of things going on the outside of his life, and them kind of things, when you see fighters have them, it's very rare that ends up being a positive thing in the ring. And of course there have been a few things going on. I'm not going to go into too much in that kind of aspect. He has to let his hands go. He can be quite a low volume fighter and just doesn't let his hands go enough, and that can really mean that he can be outboxed, and it can be tough when he just doesn't let his hands go, and that's what he has struggled with and does struggle with quite a lot. He does take hits in his own right. He's not got the best of movement. His head can stay quite kind of level on and straight on, and he's not got amazingly good movement. He's a little bit more flat-footed at times. He can be outpaced. He's got a bit of a lack of combinations. I think maybe his movement improved a little bit in his last fight, and there was glimpses of him looking a little bit better with that, but it's not amazingly good either. And I feel like he struggles against people with good movement, and I think that's what Lara has. And so Lara is the favourite for this fight, and I think that Lara will win via TKO in round 8. I think it would be nice to see him get a TKO here. I think if that power is still coming through, and is still improving. I think it would take a lot for it to still be, but if it is, then it would be nice to see it. I think he definitely has the ability here to be able to piece up Garcia if he wants to, and I think he has the ability to. I think if he just utilises his movement and his speed, and hopefully that's all kind of still around with him. Like I said, it'll be interesting to see what it's like with him fighting less regularly and him fighting and going up in age every fight. And I think there will just be a certain cut-off point, but will that be now? I don't think so. I think that could be maybe another fight down the line. I think maybe against a higher level opposition. Not saying, like I mentioned, not discrediting Garcia, but one of these other world champions or one of these other really high level contenders. And yeah, I think for the moment though, Lara, TKO in round 8. Then who we could go on to next? Alem Naknoli is seemingly not got an opponent that anybody wants to fight him. Would be a great fight if Lara is trying to get another belt before he maybe inevitably retires or whatever, but could be a great fight. Zafara is another option for Lara. He's highly ranked in the WBA. I think it could be a good fight. I think he's number 1 ranked. I think possibly not a huge fight, but I think it's just because it's the fact that he's number 1 ranked, and I'm sure Lara probably would be more likely to take that than maybe the Janibek fight, but maybe. And Adames is another option. He's ranked highly. I can't remember. I think it might be WBC. I might be wrong, but Charlo's the champion for that one, and Adames got a regular belt, maybe an interim belt. I can't remember, but Adames is going to struggle with fighting Charlo at the moment, and he might be looking for another world title route down another way, and I think Lara could be another option there. There's not really much you can go off when you're going off who's Lara going to fight next, but you never know. Could it retire after this, to be completely honest? You never really know. But that is it for today's video. Hope you did enjoy. Like if you didn't, like, subscribe if you're new, and thanks for watching.